that really kicks off the theme of activities for the year and kind of our focus of strengthening community through our relationship with Jesus Christ. The first week we looked at what the new community might mean for the early church and how we might be reflective of that. The next week, Pastor Scott shared with us the message that God calls all misfits into a kingdom relationship. And if we don't think we're a misfit, then we have no place in the kingdom. Last week we talked a little bit about what it means to be humble. That judgment at times, for us, casting upon damnation on another person and saying to them, well, you'll never make it in, has no place in our language or in our ministry. So what does beloved community look like? I want to let you know that yesterday I attended a conference for the church. And one of the people there who was leading us in this conference on how we can transform our outreach and missional efforts said we need to move from transactional ministry to relational ministry. And I thought about that over the last day. I said, man, that must just be the explanation of the whole church. Not a way in which we kind of view, okay, what's in it for me? I learned this lesson one day. I was taking my life group on a mission trip on a Sunday morning down to a soup kitchen. You've heard me talk about the day that the gentleman knew it was his birthday and Jenny's birthday. Something else happened that day. Pastor who was there that day, Jennifer Casto, said to us, folks, the best thing you can do for these people after we had prepared this breakfast for them is to take a coffee pot and go and sit with them and have a conversation with them. So I picked up a coffee pot and I went to be in relationship. But I had to tell you that my heart was always, we're here to serve the poor and the needy breakfast. I sat down with one gentleman, filled up his coffee cup, got to know him, and he just looked at me and said, "Are you not eating with me today?" And in kind of maybe I thought a grace-filled way, I said to him, friend, I had breakfast this morning. I know that there are times when it's maybe difficult for you to find that, so many of us who are serving today are choosing not to eat so there's more food for you and others in your situation. He said, oh, so I'm not good enough to eat with. I'd missed the point of picking up a coffee pot and doing ministry with. My mentality was, I'm here to serve someone else. It was transactional. I come, I have what you need, you consume what I need, God smiles, we all walk away. How often does that permeate church in its ministry? How often I hear, well, I'm not going to go there anymore because one of the churches I used to serve has made the decision that they're angry with the conference, so they're going to withhold their apportionments. I find that to be unbiblical. When our service and our giving comes with strings attached, when our attendance and our presence comes with strings attached, when we stand up and volunteer and say, I will do so, with the preconceived notion, believing that we need to get some credit for what we're doing, then we've missed the point. And it's easy for us at times, isn't it? I'll do a favor for Pastor Joe, Pastor Scott, for someone, maybe a Stephen minister, maybe I'll do a favor for Vicky, or maybe I'm doing a favor for Jill by playing in the praise band, or maybe I'm doing a favor for Muriel by singing in the choir, maybe I'm shaking hands and welcoming people today as a favor to Noel, and when it's attached as a favor, it's no longer ministry. It's ministry when we find that which God has called us and equipped us to do, and we do it out of love and gratitude for one and one only, Jesus Christ. We come to be in the community of brothers and sisters that are on this spiritual journey together, whether they're just starting or whether they've been down and around this road and they're making another loop at it. Because we want to be in the fellowship of people who have been bathed in some way in the love of God and have entrusted some part of their lives into His life, and we come hoping, praying that we might see God there. When our lives become more than what do you do for me and what can I get from you, then a whole new fullness of life starts to emerge. Grace begins to be dispensed when the expectations are failed. When others understand that even when I screw up, it doesn't matter. When we gather for worship each week, we'll talk about this in the coming month. For worship, we come with a focus and attention to the one. Doesn't matter who's sitting next to us and what they're doing, what they're feeling, or what they're wearing. How can our ministry and our life move from an attitude of what's in it to me to be one that says, what am I missing because I'm not in relationship with you? When I can recognize the worth of the person I'm in relationship with. And that was what the homeless gentleman was communicating to me, wasn't it? People from the soup kitchen know they come up each week, they ask the staff, how many meals do you need to take home? And I always say none. Some of them get offended by that, I think. Almost as if their service wasn't worth it. But when my schedule accommodates, I make it available to go down and to get a meal in the line, and I go and sit with the people we serve. We find out what's going on in their lives, what struggles they have. Not because I have any sense of wisdom to bring, but because I sense there's something I need to know about them. We will be more invitational as a people and more relational when we look around the room and realize that all these empty spots are spots for someone who we have yet to touch yet. The statistics say 40% of the people in our community who are sitting at home unchurched just need an invitation. I had the pleasure of, by a homework assignment, interviewing someone this week in that regard. What brought you to our church? What got you coming back? And they shared from their heart all the reservations that they had. You know, part of the questionnaire is what barriers existed to bring you into the church. And their communication with me is, you know, I haven't always lived the best life. I didn't feel holy enough. People out there don't understand that God's grace is for them as well. I didn't even understand. All I understood was God's judgment, how in ways in my life I had been inadequate to the plan that God had. And I didn't want to be pitied. Something beautiful happened, though. Pastor Lori met them on the street one day. Had a conversation. She identified herself as a minister. Oh boy, did the walls go up then. But in our conversation, she let me lead. She let me say what I needed to say, and she was very compassionate. No surprise if you've ever been touched even for a minute in the presence of glory. Life dealt me some hard knocks after that moment. She gave me a card. I carried that with me. And one day, I picked up that card and I said, you know, maybe. So I went to the church, kind of hoping to hide, and she remembered me. I thought she would have forgotten. It had been more than a year and a half since we had had one conversation. And she remembered me. And she valued me again, inviting me in to participate and to connect within the community. And I found a completely different world than what I thought I would find. I don't see any transaction in that whole story, in her whole description. This person is an evangelist to the down and out right now. And she spends a lot of time going around to different people saying, no, 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 they're not like that. Not here. Not at Walnut Street. Friends, we have that going for us. But we need to get out there to tell them that. And to be in relationship with them, to know that we are sinners on the walk as well. That we every day are in need of God's mercy and God's grace and God's love. The month of November, I had the privilege of going to Mexico. Maybe at times I thought, you know, we're going there to help them. But after being there, found a completely different experience of grace with those I met on the journey. And so I'm going to ask a couple of my friends that went with me in November to come forward and to share a little bit about their experience. So Tom and Danny are going to come and share a little of their experience last November, and I want you to look for the ways in which the relationships that were formed made all the difference to them.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I got my timer this time. I went long. My name is Tom Barnes, and this is my second trip to Mexico. I went last year and got to go with a group of folks that I'll talk about here in a minute. But what I want to do first is thank you, the congregation, and bless you for all the things that you helped prepare as we did go to Mexico. You supplied things like shampoos and toiletries, medications, and we packed our bags, and we had to pack extra bags just to get all that stuff down there. We had way over 60 pounds, maybe 80 pounds of stuff. We were able to give all that away during our trip. We also took prescription and reading glasses, as well as collected monies that you donated, and that was for the House of Hope. That's an orphanage that's being constructed and almost ready for occupation. But the most important thing is your prayers while we were gone. We needed to be covered in prayer, and for Pastor Joe, David and Camille Smith, myself and my wife Tina, Danny, and Nick DeFranco, we all covered those prayers. But what I'm going to talk about today is basically a day in the life of a medical missionary. I'm not a medical person, I'm an engineer. I went last time, and when I talked last year about my experience, I got to enjoy both a medical experience as well as a construction experience. And they asked me to do triage, and I'm like, what's triage? So I learned what triage was, and this time we done triage again, at least I did. But there was a group of folks that went, and not only was there triage to do, which is blood pressures and oxygen and temperatures and figuring out why the patients were there, but there was doctors, there was nurses, Spanish translators, people I call organizers. These are the folks that help organize the waiting room. We'd show up at a location, there might be a couple hundred people there ready to be served, so had to organize people to make sure they got to the right place, got to the doctor when it was time. There was folks that done children's ministry to keep the kids busy, as well as eyeglasses. We set up an eyeglass station everywhere we went, so someone had to organize that. So basically, the mission is directly across the border from Texas. I drove up to Columbus last night to celebrate my daughter's birthday, and I spent more time driving up to Columbus and back than it does to drive from Texas to our mission in Mexico. So it's just across the border. So we fly to Texas and jump in some vans, load our luggage, and away we go, and we land at the headquarters there in Mexico. We stay in a headquarters inside the town of Rio Bravo. It's a compound that has rooms for us to stay in, as well as a kitchen, common area, and there's about 30 people that went all together. So that first night we got our assignment, and everyone knew what they were going to be doing. So Wednesday, we went on a Wednesday, that was a travel day, and Sunday was a travel day as well. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday was really the days we done clinics. And for those 2.5 days, we served about 534 people. Probably about half adults, half children. So what we would do, our typical day was, we would get up and come downstairs and have breakfast by 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, everyone would grab their supplies and their equipment and load the vans, load the pharmacy, and a little after 8, we'd be off. We'd go to our location. Usually it's only about 15, maybe 30 minutes from where we stayed. The first 2 days we were at an elementary school, and the third day we were at a Rotary Club building, and then we would arrive, set things up, find out where the doctors were going to be, where the triage was going to be, organize all that. Didn't take very long, and we would start triaging patients. So we would figure out why they're there, take their vitals, and then send them off to a doctor. A lot of times the doctors would pray for them in their room, and then that's where they would get their toiletries or other types of things. They might get a medical prescription. We would have lunch every day. They would bring lunch to us at our location. We never had to cook. It was always prepared for us. Delicious hot meals. And then finish up about 3 or 5 o'clock, depends on how many patients were there, and back to headquarters for the evening, where our dinner was ready, and we would clean up and have time to read and do devotions. We'd play games in the evenings and just have a good time, fellowship with our servants. So I got just a few seconds left. A couple main points is, we had great self-service down there. These are just some of the highlights. Clothing was casual, weather was nice. We didn't have to, be super duper saints and be able to know how to say all kinds of prayers. We just came with a servant's heart and done our thing. So I hope we plan on going this fall again in November to Mexico. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, talk to any one of us. We'd be glad to fill in information. And one last item is we're looking to start a mission committee here at the church. I think there has been some in the past, but look for some announcements on that, and we hope to be able to not only do missions in Mexico, but in the region and in our neighborhood in Ross County. Thank you.
So my original presentation was 90 minutes, and so that's why we had the time thing. I was on the construction portion, which I had participated in last year, and Tom had last year as well, and I'm pretty sure since we ended up doing construction, doing concrete pouring, I think he caught wind of that and was like, I'm out of here, I'm doing triage. So. But, one thing, there's several things that stuck out in the trip. I mentioned last year I'd gone. I was curious about whether, you make an impact enough with so many people going down, whether they would remember you. And to my surprise, it was like locking in with some old friends. The construction activities, it may baffle your mind to think that you're going down to hand mix concrete and pour these patios, and you're thinking, what did I do this for? But there's so much going on in doing that kind of work and connecting with those construction workers. They call them maestros. They're very well honed in on their crafts. And the connections were just made continually over the week. It was, for me, you know, the relational aspect of the mission trip is what really hit home. And, you know, much like our own lives, you get excited, you have a new friend, you want to introduce them to your family, etc. Or maybe some of you do. Some of you might want to just put them in a closet and hide them. But, you know, there was a man that we worked very close with, Poncho, who was very excited towards the end of the week when we were doing an outreach at a nearby park with hot dogs and balloons with the kids. He brought his wife, his 2 daughters, and his new granddaughter, and was very excited to introduce us to them. And it started to solidify in my mind how much he appreciated and wanted to make that connection relationally with us, because it wasn't just about being on a work site and here's another team. This was a local that was so connected, or felt so connected, that he wanted to introduce us to his family. And something else that really connected as well was it had come up in conversation. There's 4 or 5 of these guys that are working nonstop, day after day, during the work week, there on the site of the orphanage. And it had come to light to me that these guys would all be celebrating someone's birthday together. They were just connecting outside of their work environment. And, you know, it was very striking to know that despite their what we might perceive as poverty circumstances, they were content and they were living and doing life together. And I thought, gosh, not to be brash, but sometimes on Sunday mornings we're like, hey, how's it going? And then we don't talk to anybody, we don't talk with one another, we don't see each other, we don't pay attention to anything going on in our lives until maybe the following Sunday to go, hey. And, you know, the relational aspect of what I feel is important, what I walked away with, is that how many opportunities do I miss to maybe do life together with each and every one of you? So that's what my experience is.
I also was on the construction portion of this trip, and Danny being the seasoned veteran, when I went over, you know, we were on the flight there, and I said to him, so, what's it like? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, like, what are we going to eat? And he said, oh yeah, I got to tell you this. I hope you like refried beans, tortillas, and hot sauce, because it's going to be on everything you eat. And that's pretty much our diet for the entire week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He said the medical trip gets to eat steak. And I haven't been able to confirm whether or not, maybe that was another reason why Tom signed up for the medical trip or not, but I learned when I was there that Danny was just messing with me. Now, there were tortillas, refried beans, and hot sauce at every meal, but there was other stuff too, so if that's not your flavor. I hope you understand that even in that trip, new relationships were formed. Friend requests came in for me on Facebook from Mexican people I had met when I was down there. I don't understand their posts at all. And I certainly didn't understand the card that I got in the mail for Christmas from one of them. I sent one back and wondered if they were like, I'm sure this says something about Merry Christmas from an American. But relationships were formed. And I realized in my trip, it wasn't about me going down there because I had everything that they needed. It was working with, alongside. We were all working for the betterment of the lives of people we would never know or would ever meet, to build a home, a place of safe sanctuary. And I thought, you know, that's exactly what the church is called to do. Can we move in our lives, in our relationship with those in the church and those we seek to serve, from from ones with strings attached or conditions, well, I'll do this if you do that, to one that just says, you know what? There's something that I need in our relationship together that only you can bring. Can we journey together to discover what that is? Could I find the preconceived notion that I have of what it should be like or what you're like, maybe in some way to be shattered? And I find inside you the beloved that God sees every day. Could that be our goal in our ministry, in everything we do? It wasn't about pouring concrete, but building a foundation with the people I would never know. And I walked away, ironically, the week before Thanksgiving, so much more blessed than what I felt I did or gave. I want to encourage you to consider in some way putting your faith in practice and seeing what God can do in a beautiful way. As the praise band comes forward this morning, I want to share this thought with you. Jesus said, now imagine, this isn't just a man, this is God sitting in Sunday school class with his brothers and sisters, and he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed or set me aside to send and preach the good news to the poor. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit." We have good news. To proclaim release to the prisoners. You know, we all have our own preconceived notions of how things should be and who people are. And in some cases, the odd Spirit reveals they're completely different than all we ever thought, knew, or imagined when we get into relationship with them. The recovery of sight of the blind. Blinders are taken off when we realize the ways in which our lives influence and impact someone else. To liberate the oppressed. Those out there that feel inadequate and insufficient. And to declare the year of the Lord's favor. The year God would not hold against his people. The blessing of walking with them each day. I believe that's part of the message Jesus was sharing with his hometown that day. In some cases that can be quite scary, as we know they became quite angry with him. Sometimes that's not popular. Friends, I know that there's a yearning out there for relationship, for community, for love, that comes when we are willing to allow our hearts to be transformed. Amen? I want you just to soak up this gift. The words will be on the screen this